Hello, and welcome to Into the MoTaverse, a quality and testing podcast hosted by myself, Rosie Sherry. I am the founder and CEO of the MoTaverse, or Ministry of Testing. We're in a bit of migration and trying to figure out who we are and who we want to be in the world, but I think that's okay. But yeah, today we have Chris Miles with us. And Chris Miles is head of platform engineering at Legal in General. He's based, I believe, in Brighton. I'm not sure if he actually lives in Brighton.
He is based in Brighton, born and bred.
Born and bred. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
There's not that many born and bred people from
sure.
actual Brighton. Everyone kind of migrates here and then never leaves. So
yes, indeed.
it's an honor. It's an honor to meet someone who's actually from Brighton.
Yeah.
Welcome, Chris. It's good to have you here. I'll let you introduce yourself in a second. But I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to say is we were chatting just before this call, and one of our goals at Ministry of Testing is to invite people in, and one of the reasons I've invited Chris is because he's been around for so long, and we were trying to figure out like how long you've been around in the MoTaverse, and quite often we try to kind of think back in terms of what was the first test bash you ever went to. We didn't quite figure it out, but it's been at least 10, 11, 12 years maybe, which is pretty cool. And you're still around, still around, but moved on or worked your way through the world through different jobs. And it's pretty cool to see you as head of platform engineering. But yeah, would you like to give a quick intro to who you are?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, Rosie. Chris Miles. So I work at Legal in General currently in platform engineering. But my career is really a testing career. That's kind of where I started in technology. Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where I've been really lucky to choose how my career's gone, or lots of things have happened, but I've definitely always kept quality at the forefront of my thinking, and I've always had a fairly holistic view of quality. So actually, kind of where I am today and kind of the way my career's gone is entirely down to testing and those kind of lessons that we learn through that. And actually, a lot of the influences definitely come from Ministry of Testing and those test bashes and stuff. It really helps you kind of expand your horizons and see things differently.
It's actually really interesting because like one of the things that I've been doing is I've kind of been thinking about this podcast and who do I want to speak to. And one of the things that I kind of want to do is just go back to all these people that I know have been around for a long time and just check in with them and see what job they're doing, see what the current job title is. But I've definitely checked in with a few, and a lot of them have like head of engineering type roles now, which I think is super interesting. Do you have any thoughts on that? Especially like in relation to like what you say about quality and testing has been a huge influence, and sometimes I think it's easy to talk about it, but also like how do you feel like it compares to maybe like developers who have ended up on a similar path to you?
Yeah.
And what's different?
So I think it can be quite different. I think, and again, it's kind of tarring people with a brush. It's just a generalization, but I think a lot of people who go through that kind of traditional software developer career path, it's much more focused on how they do their coding, the skills that they have. It's much harder skills, I guess, generally. And so you don't necessarily end up with that breadth of experience that you might have if you come from maybe a less well-defined role or background. Like you said, I've been in testing for a long time, best part of 25 years, and it definitely was a career that you fell into. When I started, I fell into this career. It wasn't really a career. It wasn't a job particularly. And it's kind of grown into something much more recognizable now. But of course, what that kind of allows you to do is just learn lots of different things, bring lots of different experiences in. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest difference that I see in the people that have come from those different sorts of backgrounds. I'm definitely a lot less technical than some of my colleagues. I'm not someone who sits and writes a lot of code. That's just not the way my career kind of went, or actually the way my brain really works. I'd love to sit down and learn more, but I don't have the attention span to do to do it. So it's been really helpful to be able to flit around, I guess, and do different things, bring different things.
Can you think of things that have perhaps helped you on that? Because I definitely feel you on that side of like, you almost feel, what's the right word? Just like you're just not as good as everyone else when you don't code, or there's so much pressure to learn to code from all angles. And one of the things that I've been doing, I started last year, was conversations with leaders in quality. And one of the themes that has really kind of stuck with me is the fact that actually we're too automation focused, or we're too code focused for testing careers, and actually we don't need to be, right? But there's still this obsession, and even now, like I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they were like, looking for a new role, and she was saying the recruiters putting pressure on her to say, well, you need coding skills. Your coding skills aren't up to scratch. And the way it still makes her feel, as someone who's probably been in the field as long as you, to be honest, there's still this story of we have to learn to code. But yeah, I guess like to summarize that is like the reality. What I'm trying to come around to is like the actual reality is that we don't code as much as people think we do, or we don't need to code, or even there's been trends where teams are doing less test automation, or the test automation is actually being done by the developers now, not the actual testers. But yeah, I guess the question there is, what do you think is like the way forward now, rather than, I guess, trying to get bitter about the past? It's like, do you see that? I mean, do you apply that in like your teams, for example? Can we change from that perspective? It's like, how can we lead with not that expectation?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of a bit of both ways. And if I'm honest, I've probably always been a little reticent on some of the automation and some of the ways that automation have gone, because I don't think it gives you the outcomes that you think you're getting from it. But at the same time, it is super important. We can't get away from the fact that automation is the only way that you can do testing if you want to go faster. We're doing continuous delivery or whatever. You're going to have a set of tests that you trust. I think I've definitely seen lots of sort of anti-patterns with automation, and trust is the biggest one, where we end up with teams that write lots of automation and then they still do lots of testing because they just don't feel confident in what their automation does, and there's a disconnect. So definitely the way that we've built our teams at Legal & General, and the teams that I've been in and built previously, it's always been about the team taking responsibility for the quality, and the quality engineer, the tester, the QA, however their fashion is that year, their responsibility really is that championing of the quality and making sure that keeping the team kind of accountable for the quality of their work, but using techniques like Three Amigos or whatever, and pairing, working together as a team, even a small subset of a team, to work and code and test all at the same time, so that by the time it's finished, you've done all of that test analysis work that you would be thinking of. You've gone through and got a good shared understanding of what you're building. By the time it's built, hopefully the engineer that's written the code will know what you're going to be testing, and you almost don't need to. You've had all of those conversations up front. You've got lots of clarity, and the automation test should pop out as part of it. There's no issue in, we used to get very upset about you can't test your own work, which is kind of true, but if you're not working on your own, you can. And there's lots of different ways of testing. I think the definition of what we used to think of as testing is just so small, and testing covers so much of everything, all the way from an idea to that decommissioning. There's testing happening everywhere along the way, and lots of that testing could be automated, but not necessarily just by running another playwright script. It's not always that same automation. So I really value what automation brings, and it's definitely something that we focus on, building enough automation. I guess, like a lot of these things, it's that whole kind of Goldilocks principle, not too much, not too little, just right. And nobody knows what that is until suddenly it sort of feels right. If you're not spending all your time maintaining the tests, you've probably got it about right. But I definitely feel that sort of pain of the difficulty of implementing some of those tests. And I think that's where things are getting much more interesting now, and much more, I guess it's much more kind of democratizing with the widespread use of the AI coding assistants, and just the ease of using some of the modern frameworks. Using Playwright is infinitely easier than it was to use Selenium, 12 years ago or whatever, and having to learn Java just to be able to write a couple of tests. Now your tests come out exactly right. The number of times that I started Java in 24 hours, and it took me 24 hours to read the introduction. But yeah, exactly. So I think it's actually a lot easier to get into now, and there's a lot more expectation behind it. But I really like it when teams work together on that testing, automation. And I think the thing that we've always done with our quality engineers, first of all, we've always called them engineers, so that we get rid of that boundary between, that's a tester, that's a developer. They're just engineers. And that doesn't change anything in what the people do, particularly, or what they know, but it does give them more permission. So we've always been keen on ensuring that those people working in quality have access to the code, and an expectation that they should be looking at the code, they should be looking at pull requests, even if they don't really know what's happening, even if they can't sort of read and follow it, because by osmosis they end up learning how to do some of these things. Or you look at a test that's been changed and you see that actually it was really easy. It's you can see what changes have happened, and you realize actually you can do those changes, and over time people start making those changes. But yeah, I think that we're really seeing that accelerating with, we're using Copilot, and suddenly people are able to do things that they've always wanted to do but didn't know they could. We've had a colleague of mine just was writing all the unit tests. There was an application, didn't have enough unit tests. She is a very technical person, but she couldn't write those tests herself. But with the help of Copilot, she knew the tests she needed, and it helped her write those tests. And so that was really powerful. Or another friend, actually, who's really struggled with automation, has always felt that pressure to be different, be better. And that's been very difficult for them. And now they're there and they're doing it in a way that they've never been able to before, because they always had the skills, they always had the knowledge, they just didn't have the language to express themselves. And so that's what's really exciting, I think. Now.
You said quite a few things there that have kind of sparked my mind, I guess. And one is like the idea of just like getting involved even if they don't understand, and I think that's quite powerful, right? Because it's like, I know, like, I guess in my past it's like you feel like you need to understand things, but having this pressure that we have to understand all the time, but it's like even just like observing the code, or even like, I don't know, with AI and understanding the code, you can use AI to like ask questions, right? So it can start to help you understand, or you can ask your colleagues as well, I guess, but it depends what you have access to. But I think this, I guess the trend of quality and testing is like we should be encouraged to explore that without feeling bad, and then also on top of that, like you were talking about, like like testing has changed. It's all of a sudden easier to do certain things, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier to, like, for example, read the code because you can grab a bit of code and ask Claude to explain it to you. So some aspects are really easy, or you can, write good some code at least with AI, rather than trying to do a Java in 24 hours book and actually not make any progress, right? So it's so many things that are easier. And as a result, like, quality and testing has changed. Of course it's changed. And it's going to continue to change. And that's where I feel a bit excited about. So I guess, how do you see that, like, in your current role, or what you're planning for, what you're thinking for? Is like, what it's almost like, what did you see quality as before, and what do you see it as, like, moving forward?
Yeah, so I don't think quality changes, because it's always that thing that someone finds important, that finds useful. And I think certainly in the industries that I've worked in, they're very much commercial industries. So ultimately the quality is measured by the return on investment that you get. That's when you know that your quality is enough, if people are still consuming those services or whatever that you're providing. And so I don't think that's going to change at all. I guess where I would imagine things will be going is things will be going faster and faster, and everything becomes easier to change. And actually, I think that's, if I'm looking at anything with my engineering hat on, it's the ease of change that I'm most interested in, and the impact of failure. And if we can decrease both of those, which is, it's things that we've been doing for years now, and that's only going to get easier. That's when our kind of view on what quality is, I think, really will start to shift, or what we need to do to get quality, or if we even need to have the quality that we used to have, because it matters less. We never want someone to have a bad experience, but we know that no matter how much we test and learn, people always end up having a bad experience. We'll always miss things. And so, nowadays we would treat that with our observability. We would think about things like continuous delivery. We would have all of those good things like canaries and blue-green deployments and stuff, so that it's, and feature toggling, so it's really easy to get change in and out. And if we get change in and out and we hear what our customers are saying about those changes, whether that's the comments that they're bringing back, or whether that's something in our system logs or some kind of observability across our system, then we can know whether our quality is good enough. And as that accelerates for us now, especially with the way kind of AI is going, and AI can help us write that code, it can help us test that code, but it can also help us operate the applications in our customer environments or whatever, then I think that's when the view of testing starts to probably feel quite different. And I think it's, what I'm particularly excited about is it feels like a space where all of those critical thinking skills that define the best testers really come to the fore, because it's all about communication, and it's all about questioning, and thinking and what ifs. And now we're starting to use all of those skills in a slightly different way to work with our machines to help us achieve those kind of outcomes that we're looking for. So it's a really exciting time, I think. But fundamentally, I don't think anything has changed that much. Just the risk of us going wrong feels smaller. Or the impact, I think the risk is bigger, let's be honest. But the impact of those risks is hopefully starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller, because we know very quickly when it's gone wrong. And if you can know it's gone wrong and change it, and you haven't invested lots of time, effort, money into getting to that point, then you've got a lot more freedom.
How do you think, like, this ease of change, I guess, if that's like something to tap into or a principle to follow, is like, as quality and testers, I'm trying to think now, it's like, I'm trying to think are testers, are we tapped into that enough, and do we see our work as easy to change? Or I think that's something interesting to reflect upon as like a principle of like the work we do, is like how is this contributing towards the ease of change? How can we, like, ease of change is like a flywheel, right? We want to keep going, and anything that slows things down is a problem for the business. So it's almost putting that lens on from a testing perspective. It's like, what is the work we're doing contributing to that ease of change?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's definitely where testing has earned itself a bad name over the years. There's been many times, and I'm very grateful, I think, for finding the Ministry of Testing and showing me kind of other ways. I guess I was on one of those very, very early ISEB courses, what you call ISTQB now. It was literally my first testing job, and the first thing he did was this. I think I went on the second course, which was, it was a long time ago, although thankfully Dorothy Graham was one of the people that was doing the training for that. So, there were some very clever people there, but it's so prescriptive, and, it's, the language, it was all wrong at the time. It was always, this is the best way to do something. And it wasn't ever about learning. And I think now testing has become, and quality, I think it's that focus on learning. So if you're, you've got your Gandalf staff and you shall not pass, that's never going to help anyone. The shift that I think we made a long time ago, certainly in the teams I've worked in, was around that joint responsibility for delivering value. I guess I've been lucky to always have worked around, or nearly always have worked around, kind of iterative development processes. So I think, I started off doing RAD and like the rational unified process and things like Scrum and those agile ways of working. But that realization, that's I guess a lot of the stuff behind some of that thinking I have around the ease of change. It all comes from making that switch from testing for compliance to testing for learning, I guess. And obviously that applies to the work that you're doing to test an application, but also, of course, you then have to think about that testing all the way through your process. So have I done the right thing? Is it really what the customer wants? Is it actually what the customer is using? All of those kinds of considerations. So yeah, I think that learning twist is probably the most helpful thing that I kind of learned. And learning that from some of the people that I saw at Test Bash, and kind of hearing that there were other ways of doing things. And I think that, combined with the fact that when I started testing, I was super lucky. So it was 2001. The internet was a thing, but it wasn't the thing it is today. And testing wasn't well understood. So I was lucky that I started off, and my whole career really has been around digital, as we'd call it now, but around, kind of web testing, websites. And so I would be reading things, and I would hear about things like, usability testing, as we used to call it back then, or and because it had the word testing in, I thought that was probably something I could do, or I was allowed to think about. And so, I was never constrained, I guess. That was super lucky, because nobody knew what the job was anyway. And so you just got to do these different things, learn these different things, and bring all of those different ideas and industries into kind of what you're doing. So I guess we've always had that luxury. I've always had that luxury of being able to do more than just testing.
Do you feel like you've still got a luxury of having influence at the moment over how things are done and where things are going?
Yes. Yeah, I think I do, to be honest. And I guess that's a lot of where I try to work now. So obviously my role has changed a lot. It's been, I don't know, about 8 years since I was hands-on doing some testing, but it's become much more in an organization like the organization I work in. It's a big, fairly federated organization. There's teams all over the place. There's leadership all over the place. But I'm in a position where we can start spanning some of that and bringing some of that together and helping people to decide together, and taking some of that leadership away from the leaders and allowing the practitioners more kind of say and a bigger voice, kind of amplifying those practitioners to bring together the best of what they do with the strategy and direction of their leadership, to try and build something that's really powerful, I think. And really, we're certainly seeing things becoming more aligned. I guess that's a big word for me, that kind of idea of alignment. It's not about doing the same things. It's about doing things that work together, that aren't causing a problem for one another. So you're working in an aligned way, not in the same way.
Would you say it's accurate to say that perhaps businesses are looking at technology or products in a different way now? Like, I don't know, I think back 10, 15 years ago, and it was all about agile processes and, evangelizing around that. And then now, like, thinking about what you're saying it's more about alignment. There's no buzzwords in anything you're saying. It's just like more cohesiveness, more maybe community or systems, and like, I don't know. It's like, what do you see? Does that sound like an accurate observation?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, you're definitely seeing this, I think, a lot more in people are talking about, product models and stuff now. which feels like that next evolution of what we used to talk about as being agile. Once upon a time that served us well. It felt like a differentiator. It was different. It had lots of ideas. Lots of those ideas, when you look back, I saw Dan North talk maybe a year or two ago around some of this and about things that seemed like a good idea at the time, but now when we look back, maybe they weren't such a good idea at the time. And I think some of that's true. But I also think some of it is just because things have changed. So I know, so I work closely with Lee Scrum Master. I guess I've worked with him for a long time now. And one of the things that he is good at talking about is language. And I get super excited by language. I've certainly got a kind of a mind that takes things a little bit too literally sometimes. So language is super important to me. And I've been working a lot kind of recently around trying to simplify language, actually take our language back to more basic childhood language and take out all the complexity that we bring into work. Because we use these big words that sound clever, but actually when we get down to the basis of it, there's really just simple concepts sitting behind it. So that's what my friend Paul will be doing quite a lot is, he'll stop talking about things like change. We'll talk about learning. We'll stop talking about things like agile. It's just how we work.
Yeah.
And when you start taking all of those words that used to serve us out, it's actually quite democratizing again, and you can start talking to the people who surround your work, and it doesn't feel like you're trying to blind them with science. You're not trying to be complicated. I guess that's the thing that's really changed with technology, right? I think once upon a time you had a business and then you built technology to support it. And now every business is technology with the business surrounding it. It just is your product. It's your shop. It's whatever that is. It's your place of work. That technology is how people generally interact with you. So
I love that. That. And the language aspect, I feel that as well. And I guess, a big part of that is the neurodiversity movement as well, which probably taps into it, right? It's just like there's a lot of people that just, I've often thought of it in terms of, especially like community terms. I guess I often say good community is good communication. I was like, you have to communicate things in so many different ways because people just either don't see stuff or don't understand it, or you have to simplify your language, or you have to, think about how you talk to people. Or is it audio based? Is it text based? Or is it visual? Or is it, all these kind of things? It's like, community is hard, and like building a business is community, right? There's people in it, so anything with people in it is a community. And the language angle is interesting to me from that. And I think I do love the idea of like, cutting out stuff that it just doesn't make sense, right? And if we can like find the bravery of like putting up our hands and say, hey, I don't understand what you're saying, can we change that? Or even like words in testing that haven't quite, like oracles is probably a phrase that is often used in testing, and I've never liked the term oracle.
No.
Something in it always, I always find like I have to think really hard. It's like, what is an oracle? What does it actually mean? And I guess in the past I would have felt stupid about it, but now I'm like, well, if I'm confused about it, then maybe someone else is. Or is there a better way of explaining what an oracle is, or just not using the phrase and just using something else? I don't know, but
I definitely feel that. I think sometimes there's, like I say, words can be quite important to me, and the specificness, I guess, of those words. And sometimes I want to use a word that might not be straightforward because it means something that I can't describe. Otherwise, it's just that word. But all too often, you're using those complicated words just because it's easy, or just because other people do, or if you've got to explain, if you spend more time explaining what a word is than what it is that you're trying to share with that word, then what's the point? Yeah, Oracle is definitely one of those ones that I would struggle with, because it's not a word that I use. Maybe that's because I speak English, and it's not a word that is in sort of common parlance. There you go, using long words. But it's not a word that we would commonly use. So it feels weird. And in fact, in technology, right, I'm of that age where a lot of my work was spent working with Oracle. And so then I'm like double thinking about everything. You say, oh, you said Oracle, you didn't mean Oracle, you meant Oracle. And, then you're like, oh, your mind's blown a bit. So, yeah, I just think language is just fascinating. And the influence that it actually has on how you work, how you convey those kind of ideas, is just incredibly powerful.
What about language in relationship to, I guess, influencing quality, or how do you influence quality with language to, I guess there's people who are on your team, but then I'm also thinking like the people up above, any thoughts, I guess, on how to influence quality and get what you want?
Yeah. So I gave a talk on this a couple of years ago, actually, around how we built a quality system. And it was very much this idea of this simplified childish language, and talking about the idea of friends, but thinking what I actually mean by friends. And, now friends means all sorts of things to me. But when I was, much younger, maybe I was at school, 4 or 5 years old or whatever, and friends was a really straightforward concept. And friends was all of those people that surrounded me. Maybe they were in my class, maybe they were just people I knew, but I knew they were my friend. And when they're your friend, you know that you've got to do the right thing by them, you've got to be considerate, all of those kinds of things. And you know that they're people that are there for your good, I guess. And, I'd have a party or something, and I'd invite all my friends from my class. But do you know what? Half those people I didn't know. There's a fair chunk of them that I really didn't like, but they were still my friends. And that still kind of carried something with it. And if I think about those friends and I put that concept, say, on the people within my system, now I think differently about how I interact with them. And I think about making sure that I'm kind to those friends, because that's what you have to do. And then, if I unpack a word like kind, it's not nice. I don't have to just placate everyone all the time, or placate everyone all the time. It's much more around doing the right thing by people, making sure that I'm keeping myself in check. So really simple twists, using language that we don't bring into business, but that actually everyone understands. There's no complexity behind it. It's really straightforward. The concepts are really easy. And if I think about that, then that's quality to me. Kindness and quality are things that are the same, or at least remarkably similar.
Yeah. I love also, you made me think about like the language we use in MOT, and like we're always trying to play on language, but really we're trying to create understanding, I guess. And we like the puns as well, so it's like we have puns and it's like,
and it's interesting because another kind of one that comes up with language, and we often talk about this negatively, is things like jargon. And it's very difficult to get into a group or a community that uses a lot of jargon, and it feels very negative. But if we put a twist on that and we think about colloquialisms and we think about local language and we think about how that actually builds communities. You think of regional dialect, for instance, and you feel an affinity to that group of people because of the language and words you use. You point out I'm from Brighton, so I don't pronounce my T's, because then I know you're from Brighton. And those things, they're kind of helpful. So there's just so much complexity behind all of it. But when you try and take it back to those kind of basic human needs of, most of us, again, big generalizations, but there's that need for connection where we're based on community, the way that we live, work as humans. It's all about community. We don't do things on our own. So using language that brings you together is very powerful again.
Yeah. And I guess like another thing that makes me think about, just thinking about our current challenges with the MoTaverse and generally like community and learning and how people's habits are changing. It's like, just like quality and testing is changing or tech is changing. It's like how we think about community, I think, has to change as well. And I guess with language also comes like, one of the things that we're trying to do is just like create shorter bits of insights. We call them insights at the moment. We did call them trends, but we're now calling them insights. But it's like, based on this conversation, I might extract 3 insights to surface as short pieces of content for people. And, perhaps that ties into like the language aspect, the simplification aspect of attention spans are shorter, or we have to think about how to communicate differently, or surface ideas and content in different ways. And so that's definitely like on top of my mind, is like, yes, this conversation is great and people will listen to it and appreciate it, but not everyone has the time to process it. But we can still surface the ideas in so many ways, and that makes me excited. From a community perspective, but also from a quality perspective. It's like, right, if quality is everywhere and you have to communicate to people, then we have to think about all these things as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned around kind of the understanding that we're gaining around things like neurodiversity now, and I now know why I find it difficult to sit through an hour-long podcast, because that's never going to happen. I can put it on 2 times speed, and that's the best I can do. But actually, it's those little nuggets that kind of come out. There'll be times when people will just say the smallest thing, and it sticks with you forever. I've always enjoyed that test bash with the 99-second talks, and there's one that I still go back to and I still share with teams kind of regularly, and it was the most incredible talk because it had slides and everything, but it was around pairing, and a really lovely picture that basically showed that pairing isn't about getting the most of us, it's getting the best of us. And I think that was probably the closing statement, but it didn't need out, you could have talked about that subject forever and ever. And in fact, I've sat through plenty of talks around how we do pairing and stuff, but actually that was enough. All I needed to understand was that if we do stuff together, we balance out our weaknesses and strengths, and we're just better. And it's like, made sense.
And maybe that's like a great like closing topic, is like quality is about spotting those kind of things to some extent. It's like we have to see the system, and yes, we point out problems and all of that kind of stuff, but actually I love pointing out the good things or the ideas, or I guess one of the things that I've kind of grown into, especially in the past couple of years, is kind of realizing that I see certain things that others don't. And part of that is neurodiversity, right? It's like part of it is like I just see things in a completely different way that no one else sees, and that is quality as well, right? And it's like, how can we surface these things that we see and tie that into the idea of quality and testing or just building products is just like, yeah, it's just like we're building a quality product. We still don't have a bug tracking system, for example. We don't need one at the moment. But we still manage everything, but we're still building something that's really good, in my opinion. And we communicate a lot, we talk a lot, we speak to our people a lot, we get feedback a lot, we take action on it.
Yeah.
It's care, but I guess all of that kind of leaves me with excitement. Is that actually our roles are not just reporting bugs and finding problems. There's like so many nuances to it that I was disillusioned a few years ago, but now I actually feel like quality is care, quality is at the heart, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it just needs more voices to make sure that it isn't forgotten. And they can be people, they can be metrics. I don't care what those voices are, but there needs to be things that we are listening to and hearing that really advocate for quality in our systems.
Advocate for quality in our systems. I like it.
There you go.
Any final thoughts before we finish up?
I think just that it is an exciting time to be in testing, and I think all those people that have felt left behind, because I know that's been a thing for a lot of quality people, to know that those skills that you have worked so hard to gain are actually the skills that we're going to be needing more than ever. And the automating testing, that's brilliant and it does a job, but it doesn't do the same job. You don't automate quality, you automate the testing. And those quality skills are going to be really important, and they're going to be, I think it's probably that the fact that we're now getting to a time where you're going to be able to do things that you never thought you could do, but you've always had the knowledge, understanding, technicality. Those things have always been there. You just didn't have the way to express that. And, I think now that time's coming, and we're going to see some really, really exciting things and hear from some really different voices in the way that work gets done. It's an exciting time.
Awesome.
Cool.
It's amazing. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Rosie.
Yeah, and we'll see you in the MoTaverse, right?
Indeed. Definitely will. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.